Hello, Off-Season After Dark fans. Mike Huseman here. Glad to have you with us for episode 7. And we jump back into the Power 4 after 2 weeks of G5 conferences. We are very excited tonight to have Zyler Buchanan with us from Broadway Shuffle to talk about Red Raiders, Texas Tech football, a team that's been generating a lot of buzz for many good reasons. And, this continues our tour around the conferences, so to speak. So after this one, we are an SEC-based network. I will have an SEC person on who is not a regular of the show, but this is the third of our 4 major conferences, and the one where we certainly have the most parity going into this season and the most teams who will be able to compete for a conference title. Zyler, glad to have you here. Tell the people a little bit about who you are, what you do, and where they can find you on socials.
Yeah, Mike, thanks for having me. Me and my buddies run a show called the Broadway Shuffle. It's a Texas Tech Center podcast, but we do a lot of stuff around the Big 12, obviously with a huge Texas Tech slant. But really where I love diving in is numbers on the conference. What does the Big 12 look like as a whole? How do all the 16 teams stack up? It's really kind of a fun project for me. I love analyzing a lot of this stuff. Texas Tech obviously provides a ton of content, but covering the Big 12 specifically is something that I really enjoy.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah. So how long have you guys been doing your show?
Lifelong Texas Tech fan, but we've been doing our show since last year. So we've covered, everything from almost losing to ACU to the insane portal haul of this past December and January. It's been a wild ride. Content creation is crazy, but this is such a fun space. I'm super happy to be here. Really, really excited to get into some of the stuff we're going to talk about tonight. And just continue growing and expanding our show.
You lived through the Matt Wells years like I lived through the Will Muschamp years, so I can
survived would be a better word. Maybe not lived. I don't know if anyone truly lived during the Matt Wells era, but you felt a lot of things, I guess.
Absolutely. Now, our listeners out there, they can find you on our Twitter and YouTube, the 2 best places to find your content.
We're on all, Apple, Twitter, Spotify, all that stuff, but mainly the show is on YouTube. And then we do a lot of our stuff on Twitter. If you want to follow our Instagram, Conrad will send you a bunch of Texas Tech content into your story feed. But main places are YouTube and Spotify if you really want to hear what we're doing. Most of our stuff is in video and audio form.
That's good to know. I know we have a few Spotify listeners, and I myself am not on Spotify yet, but was thinking about, adding some of our stuff there. Texas Tech, obviously, a team who's been generating a lot of buzz this year. So in this offseason, we recently saw, top recruit Felix Ojo committed there. As a native Minnesotan, one of the guys I was really excited to see where he ended up would be Cole Wisniewski, safety from North Dakota State.
Sure.
Why are the Red Raiders doing so well this offseason, both in the portal and recruiting?
Yeah, I think it would behoove me to not mention the impact that NIL and revenue sharing has had for Texas Tech. They've obviously committed to that at the highest level. Cody Campbell is never far from the headlines, and he's kind of spearheaded that. But it's not just Mr. Campbell. There's a lot of very wealthy donors that back the Red Raiders that aren't nearly as in the limelight as he is. So, Cody gets a lot of the attention and a lot of the praise, and rightfully so. But there's plenty of other people behind the scenes, and that's a huge part of it. And with that became a new, $280 million facility. It's the largest continuous football facility in the entire country. It's massive. It's nice. I've toured it on several occasions, and it really is unbelievable. I know that helps, but truly the NIL and the revenue sharing, that's been a huge part of the way that your staff has created aggressive compensation packages is the best way I could describe it, to go out and get the talent that you need. Something that, if you followed the Big 12 at all last year, Tech went 8-4 in the regular season, but it was kind of a smoke and mirrors 8-4. There were several games that they were pretty fortunate to win, most notably an overtime win over FCS Abilene Christian. A lot of really close games. They were 6-1 in 1-score games. So there was a lot of improvement that needed to be made on this roster. It wasn't just taking an 8-win team and trying to then take that to a conference. It was really closer to a 6 or a 7-win team and trying to do that. So you had to take a lot of steps in order to get there, and I think they did a lot of that in the offseason.
Yeah, the one I remember was the 1-point TCU win. That was a nice win for them in a game that could have went.
Unfortunately, a loss. 1 point TCU lost. Yes.
Which one am I thinking? I might be thinking of the 1-point win against Iowa State.
Yes. Yeah.
Is
You
that a
won it at the
1-point win?
very end. Yep.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's the
so
one I was
you had
thinking
a
of. Yeah.
number of games like that went your
Yeah.
way. You know, you had a 1-point win against ACU and 1-point win against Iowa State. You had the TCU loss. You know, if you're into Bill Conley's second order win percentage, you were
Yep.
like a 5.8 win team last year. So really, really
Okay.
overachieved
Yep.
analytical expectations on
You're
that end.
getting more than one. That is a big difference. One
Yep,
of
serious
one
overperformance.
one of my big things is following the coaching carousel. And a guy I was very high on for multiple years was Zach Kitley, who was your guys' O coordinator last year, has since
Mhm.
went to Florida Atlantic. And I think that was a great hire for them. But then you guys bring in Leftwich, another, I think, fantastic hire from Texas State, where he was offensive coordinator for Kinney. So
Yeah.
what can the people out here expect out of the offense there? Is it going to be business as usual? Are they going to change up the schemes and what they're doing? What is that going to look like?
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, most of the coordinators since Kingsbury have had some sort of air raid flair. Even,
Yeah.
you know, David Yost during the Matt Wells era, that was probably the farthest departure. And Kitley had some elements of the air raid. You know, Leftwich is kind of in that tree, but he's really more of a Bryles disciple, not necessarily under Bryles, but that tree. He runs a version of the veer and shoot. So you're going to see a ton of, you know, choice routes on the outside and extremely wide splits with your receivers. You know, I was watching a breakdown. Wesley Ross did a really good piece on Substack, and it's you'll have guys lining up as far out as the sideline marker.
Okay.
They'll be way out there, so that's gonna look different when you run a lot of 10 personnel. But it's going to be a little bit different. It's, you know, every offensive coordinator says that they're going to come in and make the offense simpler and let players make play. You know, everybody says all of that
Yeah.
hoorah, but really the choice route concept, which he says he's going to run, you know, 15 to 20 times a game, is a really simple concept. And you're going to be seeing that a lot. I think that, you know, I don't want to spoil any of our QB rankings, but I think that plays a little bit more into Baron Morton's strength. I don't know that he's an elite processor of the game right now compared to some of his peers. He's got strengths in other areas, but that's not an area where he's shown a you know, elite capability yet. And so I think a simplified offensive scheme could help him, but we'll see. You know, you never know how a scheme's going to fit a player until you see all 22 guys get out there in August. So we'll find out. Everybody likes to think that their next coordinator is better than their last. Everybody loves to hate on the offensive coordinator. So I thought Kitley did a great job. We'll see if Leftwich is up to the task. He's young, so we'll see.
Yeah, and so is Kitley to that point. But
Yep.
you don't get the job Kitley did, and you don't rise as fast as he did without being good and well thought of.
Yep.
Leftwich is also a guy that's risen fast, though, to his credit. So he,
Absolutely.
also a young guy, like you
Yep.
said. So I think we'll get into our usual now. We usually start off by talking about coaches of the conference and going through ratings. So in our G5 ones, I have done the rankings for those in my writing with Mike Farrell Sports. For our power ones, they're out there. There are a lot of places, so I'll critique them, you know, more than making my own. But I'm gonna show this is our list, and College Football Report is where I got this list. So give those guys credit. But in looking at this list of Big 12 coaches, and I may have my own ratings that I did. This was one of the toughest conferences for me, along with the ACC was tough too. But there are a lot of coaches here that I think are pretty good. Like there might be guys here who were 4 or 5 that you could make the case for the guys at 11, 12 to be there. Like there's a lot of interchanging, I think. I feel like this list has Whittingham Campbell at 1 and 2. I think that's fair. Personally, I had him flip-flopped. I had Campbell 1, Whittingham 2. Some people might have Dillingham there after last year. I want to see more out of him before I put him that high. He had a 3-win season the year before that.
Totally.
And then in the third place, I put Chris Kleiman at 3. He's been ultra consistent since he's been at K-State. They've been a tough team to play against. What do your top 3 look like? in the
Yeah,
conference here.
I think it always, sometimes when people talk about coaching rankings, one of the big discrepancies is what are you actually grading on? Some people say this coach is better or this coach is better. And it's, what are your criteria? And I think for me, just skins on the wall and proven experience and consistency weighs a lot more heavily than what have you done for me lately?
Okay.
If you're
Yeah.
looking at 2-year trajectory, Kenny Dillingham's got the brightest future because, the jump from 3-9 to Big 12 champion is massive, and it's only going to go up
Yeah.
from there, right? If you're an ASU fan, you'll never regress. So for me, Kyle Whittingham, Matt Campbell, Mike Gundy, that's probably how I would rank the top three. I think you can debate the order. I think Whittingham and Gundy really have a case. The sad thing for Gundy is just the last several years have been really disappointing.
So,
So it's
and
hard to think of.
I'm probably too harsh on Gundy. I rank him probably lower than anybody would, and it's because the way I view it, he's been so bad at identifying quarterbacks the last few years that I think it knocks him a
Sure,
little bit. Like that's been a
sure. And
massive blind spot for them.
absolutely. And the other thing though is one of the things that I really think elevates a coach is, that first staff is really important, but how good are you at replacing with your second coordinator and your third coordinator and your fourth coordinator? And I think there's something to be said for retaining talent, but
Yeah.
ideally your head coach is identifying people that are good enough to then become head coaches. I think that's something that is a mark of a good coach who can identify coaching talent. And so in that respect, I'm really respectful towards Gundy and how well
Yeah.
he's adapted. He was here in the early 2000s. The guy's
Yes. Yeah.
just incredible depth of tenure. But I really don't think you can go wrong with this list. I think Campbell would be third for me. Just you know how much of his success is Purdy, and I think you're really nitpicking because I think he's probably a top 3 coach in the conference.
Yeah.
But there's other factors to consider. The arguments for some of these other guys, like if I'm going to make the case for Joey McGuire, I don't think you would ever rank him extremely high on like a schematic prowess thing. I think Aranda or Dillingham would be higher in those areas. His strength is as the CEO, managing the roster, doing a lot of those things, booster, other stuff like that. That's kind of off the field. Go ahead.
Yeah. I have McGuire 7 on this list, by the way. So it's
Yeah,
higher than this guy does, but yeah.
and I think this ranking here is totally fair. I don't take umbrage with this at all. I think the one that's probably the most, not controversial, but most interesting to me is Kalani Sitake at 4. I think he's almost a perfect coach for that particular institution,
Very
but
good
would
for them.
be, not really a fit at many of these other schools. And that's not to diminish what Sitake
Yeah.
is as a coach, but he's just such a great fit for what BYU needs
Yeah.
as a head coach.
I had him at 5. He's a guy I have at 5. I didn't, in looking at him, his record at BYU, 72-43, which I didn't
Yeah,
realize it was that good. Now, the context there, in 9 seasons, 7 of them were as independent. The last
yeah.
2 in the Big 12. Where first year in the Big 12, they had all 4 of those teams had growing pains the year they came in the conference.
Absolutely, and yeah, I think that's fair. But still, once again, experience and depth. He's seen a lot as a head coach, and you got to give credit for that. Not getting fired as a head coach is a skill. A lot of these,
Yeah.
2 years from now, how many of these guys are still here?
He
And
is
that leads me.
also, like Gundy, he's went through multiple iterations of
Yep,
players and stayed consistent too. I'll give him credit for that.
totally. And I think
Sorry
you
to
got to
cut you off
reward a
there.
guy for that.
Yeah.
No, you're fine.
Yeah.
Then it's kind of when I think of these as tiers, the next guys, it's Dykes, Kleeman, Dillingham, Sanders, McGuire, Leipold, and Aranda. Those are all kind of in the same-ish tier for me. I
Yep.
think you can make really compelling arguments. Dion's 13-12 at Colorado. That's nothing super spectacular, but from where they were, that's really impressive. How much of it was a Travis Hunter, Shadur Sanders thing? There's all those arguments, and I think we'll really understand who he is this year and the following year.
Yeah.
Dillingham's ascension has obviously been very well chronicled. Can it be sustained? Kleiman has the best case as a really high floor coach. Just been really, really good, very stable, just like he was at his FCS stop. It's can he hit that ceiling? I know they won a Big 12 title, so hard to really knock him for that. But disappointed expectations last year. Aranda has a Big 12 title. That's where I think you knock guys like Joey and Leipold. They've never really won big in this conference. Where guys like Kleeman and Dillingham and Aranda have at least reached the pinnacle of this conference. But those guys are all kind of in the same tier for me. I think you can make reasonable arguments for all of them.
Yeah, one thing, and I would have said this about Climate up until last year, rarely do his team lose games they shouldn't. They did last year to Houston. But they the teams that are as talented as them or worse, they're usually winning those games.
Yeah.
I'll give them
It's just not a volatile team.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing that I give a ton of credit to Kleiman and Campbell is they develop Big 12 contending teams with, 10th to 12th in the conference recruiting classes. They're just not recruiting powerhouses. They are developing guys internally. They're never going to be the biggest spenders. They're never going to sign, top 3 classes in the conference. They just develop really well. And I think that's impressive. That's something that's sustainable and that's something that you can fall back on if resources all of a sudden dry up or other items like that. That's where those guys like that get big boosts for me.
Like in the next 5 years, we look forward to, say every year we're doing the preseason rankings, we're probably never going to pick Kansas State lower than 8. We're always going to expect them to be pretty high, I feel like.
Exactly. Yeah, it would just be very hard for me to see that team not being in the top 8.
Yeah.
That's a great point. And I don't know that I feel the same way about Iowa State, oddly enough, even though I have Campbell rated more highly as a coach.
I agree with you there. But just great. He's done it. I think he deserves to be up there.
Yeah. And so then, the guys, Aranda to me is so interesting because he had a Big 12 title and then he was terrible and then he was kind of respectable again this last year. It's just, it's been a very rocky tenure. I don't really quite know what Aranda is. I know he's a great DC, but his defensive has been terrible. Like his defense was not good last year.
Like he has the good years, but he probably gets fired the next bad year he has. That's how volatile it's been, like you were talking about.
The Baylor sources that I know, Baylor was 2-4 waltzing into Lubbock last year off the bye week. And if he would have lost that game, he was going to get fired. We all know how that ended. He did not lose that game. They curb stomped the Red Raiders and then moved on to have a really successful season. But, he's been extremely close. I mean, he was on the hot seat last year. And so
they what is Aranda? Games in a row after that,
yeah. And so he's just a very volatile coach right now for me. I think he's got a lot of upside, though. The schematic prowess is helpful, and his personality is fun if you're into that kind of thing.
And I think Jake Spavital was a good offensive coordinator hire for him. A guy that had been there that you can say, you just worry about the offense and let me do the rest. And that worked well for them. You made a great point about a lot of those coaches, from Dillingham, Sataki, Dykes, McGuire, Leopold, Gundy, Sanders, Aranda. I also, they're all kind of in that grouping. I'll tell you how that ranking went out for me. So I had Kleiman 3, Dillingham was 4, then starting at 5, Sataki, Sonny Dykes, Joey McGuire, Leopold at 8. I had Gundy at 9, which is probably too low. I don't like it, but I'm not changing it now.
What have you done for me?
Sanders at 10, Aranda at 11, and I can't believe we're in a state or a conference where I have Willie Fritz at 12. He's a fantastic head coach. They struggled year 1. He's been really good everywhere else he's been, and I think they improved quite a bit this year. I'm not saying they're going to win 8, 9. They're going to be a lot better this year, though, as a team.
I think so, too. And I think, one of the things about Fritz and the spots that he's been at beforehand, being at Tulane, being in the most resource advantaged program in a conference is helpful in building. And I think Houston sits near the bottom of this conference as far as resources allocated to football. And I think that makes his journey harder, but I believe in him as a coach. It would not surprise me next year if he is in that tier that we just talked about. And I know I didn't mention Sonny Dykes. Obviously he made the national championship and then missed a bowl game, but still making a national championship has to count for something, especially as Big 12.
Yeah. And it's odd. We were talking a year out from a national title. They miss a bowl game. If they'd been bad last year, we would be talking about Dykes on the hot seat this year. But they had another good year. So, and some of the numbers in breaking it down, looked at, from all these guys being so close together, talking about, in the last 3 years, Mike Gundy's 1 game above 500. Lance Leopold, who took over the worst power conference team in the country, he's 2 games above 500. Dave Aranda's 1 game for his career. Dion's 1 game above 500. So all of these guys are hovering in that 500 area over the same sample size. Meanwhile, Sonny Dykes is 27-13 in that time. And he was good at SMU and La Tech as well. And not many people have been good at La Tech since then. So give credit for winning there.
Yeah, those are excellent points and well taken. When we move on to those other guys, I think to me, I put Rich Rod and Scott Frost above Scott Satterfield and Brent Brennan. That's just how I have it right now because I think they deserve at least some benefit of the doubt at this point. Rich Rod's been a successful coach at this spot.
Yeah.
Scott Frost has been a successful coach. Clearly, though, the situations that they coached in, this is not the same job it was, back when Rich Rod was running this thing and when Scott Frost was a little closer, but
I have those guys tiered a little bit. So in the bottom four for the conference, I had Rodriguez, Satterfield, Frost, Brennan in that order.
Yeah, and I think I do that. Brent Brennan's a pretty clear, and Satterfield are pretty clear bottom two coaches for me right now. I think there's upside. Satterfield's been successful at other spots. Brennan had San Jose State's not an easy job.
No,
it's just, man, what I saw from Brennan last year, like
they regressed so much after Jed Fish left.
It did not seem like they really knew. There was that press conference kind of in the middle of the season with Brent Brennan when they removed their offensive coordinator. They said, no,
yeah.
this was always the plan. He was going to relinquish play calling duties halfway through the season. It's like there's no way that was the plan. In what world do you hire an offensive coordinator for half a season? It was just it seemed
Babers, a former longtime head coach at the FBS level. Yeah.
It seemed unorganized. It's not that Brent Brennan doesn't know what he's doing. That was just a really hard season to look at and say, yeah, let me rank you above somebody else.
And his new O coordinator is Seth Dagey, former Red Raider, and was at Marshall this past year as O coordinator.
Great coordinator. Oddly, my fun story on Seth Dagey, my brother played with his younger brother who played at Bowling Green. But Seth Dagey used to come out to their practices and he would get on the 50-yard line and he'd get on one knee and he'd throw the ball through the upright, man. He just had a cannon of an arm. I just remember being amazed at that as a junior high kid. But yeah, rooting for Seth Dagey, all-time underappreciated Red Raider. And I think they'll be significantly better this year because I don't know how it gets worse than what it was last year. Team with the most regression in SP Plus last year.
And I think Ishmael really that much.
Oh yes, it was a disaster.
I didn't realize it was historically bad regression like that. Okay.
Oh no, just for the 24 season, not of all time.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah.
So very, very tough season for them.
Satterfield's a guy you had mentioned some good points with him. He hovered right around 500 in his 4 years at Louisville. Ended up a game above 500, but his first year was his best season, which I don't like to see.
Yeah.
He was fantastic at Appalachian State. A lot of coaches have won games there. They've had a few recent ones that a lot of guys have won there. And in 2 years there, he's yet to make a bowl game. I like Sorsby. I'm excited to see him this year. But if they are not good this year, it might be curtains on Satterfield at Cincinnati.
Yeah, that'll be one of my hot takes later in the show about who's potentially getting fired. But yeah, he's got to have a big year. He's probably got the warmest. It's either him or Gundy have the warmest seat going into this season because I feel like the rest of these guys, well, maybe Brennan, but Brennan at least.
Year two's tough.
Yep. So that's kind of. Yeah, we'll see about that. But yeah, overall, pretty good coach rankings. I don't think there's anything that's just egregious here. I think you can make a reasonable argument for all of this. I didn't have anything that really, really bothered me about how they ranked this.
How do you feel about, let's focus a little bit with Rodriguez and Scott Frost. Going back to schools they had a lot of success at before, then they took bigger jobs. Let me phrase it this way. In year one, who do you think has more success?
I'm not all the way finished with my West Virginia preview, so I don't know that I can give the full answer on that. I actually think Frost has a chance, but it'll be almost the exact same equation. Do they figure it out at quarterback? And I know it's a tired trope, but you look at Utah last year, you look at Oklahoma State last year. It doesn't matter how good the offensive line is, how good the said skill talent is. If you don't have at least average quarterback play, it is very hard to be good in this league.
It is.
And that's what it's going to come down to. Who maybe gets luckier there or is a better developer. I think that will go a long way. Scott Frost has some pieces at UCF. That is not a barren roster. They were able to maintain a lot of that 23 class that was really good. So they've got some redshirt freshmen that are coming up. I think there's a chance that UCF surprises this year. They're if I had to pick a team in the bottom 4 of projected Big 12 standings to maybe make the title, a la Arizona State, they'd probably be who I'd go with. So I think I'll probably pick Scott Frost.
Okay. Yeah, I was curious about that. And then, just saying year one doesn't really take into account the coach's growth. If we're having this conversation after year 3, who do you think has the best 3 years span at their new school of between Rich Rod and Frost?
No, I do like Rich Rod. I do not like the hire of Alex Grinch as a DC for Scott Frost.
Yeah.
That one bothers me a little bit. It's been a while since Alex Grinch has, made a defense that was better than the sum of its parts. So I don't know.
He had a couple good years, but then they regressed a lot in a lot of ways.
And how much of that was USC not having, the right guys on defense, but it was the same thing at OU. So yeah, I don't know. I think I probably would I'm betting on UCF as a program more than I'm betting on West Virginia as a program, even if I like maybe Rich Rod a little more than Scott Frost and his staff.
Okay. And I agree with you with the Grinch hire. I will say Frost did decent with some of his other hires. Sean Clark, the former App State head coach, is the O-line coach. Mark D'Onofrio is his linebackers coach. He was, Wisconsin, Houston, and Miami guy. So there are some of those coaches I like, but the Grinch one kind of surprised me. And if I would go for the 3 years, I'd probably lean Rich Rod because he wins everywhere.
And he was good at his last spot.
Yes,
he didn't get fired.
He took a school and helped them transition to the FBS, which is not easy to do. And
absolutely,
he was phenomenal at West Virginia the first time, obviously struggled at Michigan. He was solid at Arizona, had a career-winning record when he was with the Wildcats. And then goes to Jacksonville State, where they were not great in the FCS, wins 9 games his first year. Then they make the move up. So he's one of those guys. Rich Rod has proven enough to me where I'm not going to doubt him, would be a way to word that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a very, very reasonable case.
Yeah. Okay, let's any other takes you have for this list, or should we move on to the QBs?
Man, I think we can go to the QBs. It's a fascinating list of coaches, and I think a lot of these guys are going to return. I only think one person here maybe gets fired, and I think it'll be someone between Brennan, Satterfield, and Gundy. But all of those teams, a lot of these people have to win some games. And so I think two of Satterfield, Brennan, and Gundy win enough games to give themselves another year, but somebody's going to draw the short end of that stick.
And I was having this conversation about Gundy. It had initiated with Lincoln Riley, but Mike Gundy, does he get fired, or is it, Mike, you've been here forever, we'll let you leave on your own otherwise? And that might be what it is. It might be you can go out on your own terms, but really it's our terms.
Yeah, he's got several million reasons why he shouldn't do that. But I know his buyout's restructured to make it more manageable, but entering house revenue sharing, it's going to be, do the Oklahoma State boosters have the appetite to get rid of Gundy, or does it, invest into the program and see if Gundy can? So I don't know. We'll see. He's on shakier footing than he's ever been in his entire career. So we'll see.
One of the other questions I like to ask, and I can't believe I forgot about it with the last show, but looking at these coaches, Kenny Dillingham's the obvious answer, I think. But apart from him, who's one guy on this list who, if next offseason, this coming January, a blue blood team has an opening, who's a guy on this list that with a good year could get hired?
Man, I always go Dion. That's one where, especially if he has a good year here, and athletic directors can look and say, this is not just him having a superstar QB and a 5 like Travis Hunter.
And I think the caveat there too is if Mike Norvell gets fired, he's exactly. He's the obvious Florida State guy.
Sure. The other connection, Joey McGuire and Arkansas, maybe they look that way. Joey's a little bit older, but I don't think that would necessarily be prohibitive there. I don't really see, Sataki's not a guy I see leaving. Gundy's not a guy that's going to leave. I don't really see Campbell leaving. Aranda seems fine. I don't see a ton of candidates on this list for big jobs unless Sanders and Dillingham would be, if I had to.
And I think this plays into, I'm talking about Chris Kleiman. Um, as a, Minnesotan, Kleiman fits the build of your upper Midwesterner, hardy type guy.
Totally. Wisconsin, if they open.
Wisconsin or Iowa, if Ferentz
Mhm.
retires, Chris Kleiman could be a guy that those schools look at. And I think he'd be a good fit for both of those places if
And
it would
truly, the
happen.
development of both of those programs has been because programs like Wisconsin were so stable. Programs like Iowa
Yes.
have been so stable. They haven't
No.
needed to poach
No.
talent from here. Not that Campbell would definitively go there, but the allure of the Big Ten can be enticing. And I don't know that Minnesota, it's a Big Ten job, and they're probably going to be pretty good this year. But I don't know that it has the draw that, let's say, a Wisconsin or an Iowa might have for somebody like Kleiman. But you never know. Coaches do things for a lot of different reasons, but the number one reason is money. And I think those
It
Big
is.
Ten schools will always be able to offer really, really nice compensation packages. So
That's absolutely it. Yeah, and, it's interesting to say, but like that, those were Big Ten ones. If we're looking at SEC, and those two being what have
yeah,
come to be the premier conferences, other than Dillingham and Dion, I don't think there's an SEC guy on this list. It's
yeah,
honest
yeah,
to say. Maybe
and this
Aranda,
is
he would have to really have a great year, and with the
yeah,
LSU background.
exactly. That would be the place, because so much of the SEC war is winning the narrative war. And
Yeah,
does any of these guys, unless I don't know. I'm trying to think of the situation, but a name like Sanders, a name like Dillingham, I think would really excite a fan base. I don't know that anybody else on this
yeah.
list would
The
really do
one
that
I
for anyone.
wonder with Dillingham and being an I was going to ask you this question because I was thinking about this in my head. Dillingham's an ASU alumni, which
Mhm.
might make it tougher for him to leave. He's a former O coordinator at Auburn. Does
Yeah,
he leave for that job if Hugh Freeze gets fired? It's a fascinating question. I don't think there's an obvious answer to it. It's one to
how many
ponder.
buyouts can Auburn afford over the
Yes.
last 15? It just feels like they have so many. We'll see. Dillingham says all the right things, but I
And I'm
have
not
yet to
saying they're
hear.
going to fire Freeze. I'm saying, would
Yeah,
Dillingham go there if push came to shove?
every coach talks about the current job that they're at as their dream job. I've never heard any coach say that this is a stepping stool job for me. I
No.
can't wait to take the next big job. So I don't really put a
Great
ton of
point.
stock into statements like that. Um, I don't know. What do him and his family want? There's only probably a handful of people that actually know that. I think it would be really tempting to get into the SEC. That's just really, really tempting. But he's
Yeah.
got a great gig at Arizona State, so we'll see what they're
You
willing
love
to
him.
put up for him.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think that's a great point. The other one, and this would require two moves, but another place where he'd coached at before. If Dan Lanning takes an SEC job someday, Dillingham
Mhm.
could be an Oregon guy, I think, and that's another
Yeah.
interesting job. Yeah,
Yep.
for that.
But yeah, that one. There's so many cascading dominoes. If Oregon is
Absolutely.
somehow opening
Yeah.
up, that'll be it. Unless it's an NFL thing. But yeah,
Yeah,
a very good thought.
exactly. That could be part. Or if Kirby retires, then
Sure.
Lanning's a Georgia candidate. Yeah.
Sure. Absolutely.
Um, but yeah, that guy that could get the blue blood job. The only guy I will say definitively will not coach anywhere else is Whittingham. This is his
Yeah.
last job. But that's it.
Yeah.
That's the only because even Gundy, if Gundy leaves,
He could
maybe he
go. He
goes
could.
somewhere else. Yeah.
I could see him popping up at, Georgia Southern or so. Just taking like a fun whatever the heck
Yeah.
I want. I can do
Something
whatever I want at this
he
point.
can wing the ball around, do it. Arkansas State, not that Butch
Yeah.
Jones, but a place like that in North Texas. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So yeah,
but
good stuff. But
we'll,
yeah, let's get into the quarterbacks.
awesome. So this KSL Sports is where I got this list. Top two, tough to argue with Sam Levitt being number one. I'm a
Yeah.
Sawyer Robertson. I like Robertson, but why don't I kind of let up the coaching one? Tell me what you think about this list before I say too much about the QBs.
Yeah. So it's always hard when you look at quarterbacks and other that are opponents. I'm always trying to find flaws because I'm like, I don't want you to be that good because I want to be able to beat
Yeah.
you. And I watched Levitt in person when he played in Lubbock, and he wasn't very good. And it was just kind of like, okay, this guy's kind of whatever. But then he turned into an absolute fireball last 4 to 5 games of the season. Still didn't overtake Sawyer Robertson for total QBR in the conference, interestingly enough. But, as I've watched the guys, I had the same thoughts where he's not a perfect passer yet. He's really athletic, great runner, great at extending the plays, loves Jordan Tyson. He's got a great weapon down there. But when you just compare him to other QBs, I think right now he really is, I wouldn't say head and shoulders, but he is very much in his own tier in my mind.
And I think one thing people might, in ranking him so high, they might be neglecting what a dude he had to hand the ball off to every other play last year. That was a big deal for them.
Yeah, absolutely. The knocks on Levitt are, how much was Scadabo really affecting how defenses keyed in? Because he did drive the offense. Now, running backs are the most replaceable feature of an offense. We all know that if you're into the advanced analytics side. But it'll be a big test for Levitt. Will the offense run through him this year, and what does that do to his efficiency? Can he handle that? What if the bag's kind of out on Arizona? Guard Jordan Tyson and make one of those other wide receivers make a play. But I do think Levitt's talented. Dillingham obviously did a great job elevating him. That next tier, this is similar to the coaching tier. I think there's just a ton of guys in this next tier. I think Sawyer Robertson, very accomplished passer, did a lot of great things. He's got a long windup. He's not necessarily super efficient on his mechanics. But good QB. I mean, his season last year was excellent. Nobody can really argue that. The weird thing, and this is another knock on the staff, is he started out as a backup, but was clearly better than in his name, Daquan Finn.
Who has transferred back to the MAC and is at Miami now with Chuck Martin.
Yeah. And so, why was he not the starter initially? What do we really have there in that offense staff? I don't know. I'm just asking questions. But then you've got guys, and I think Saul makes a really clear case to be 2 with Josh Hoover. Those are just the most accomplished guys.
I'm lower on Rocco Beck than some people are. I don't know why. They had a hell of a receiving core last year. I'm lower on Beck than some people are.
Yeah. I tend to be, Beck is one of those guys that the way he plays the game always seems better than what his numbers indicate. Like I was looking, it was sub 60% completion percentage. And I'm like, you did that with Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins? Like, how did that happen?
And a Saltio line every year. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's their offensive line. So, but I like Beck. I like Johnson. Johnson is a kind of a, I am probably lower on Johnson than everybody. He's like a discount brand Sam Levitt to me. He's not as good of a passer. He is an elite athlete, though. I mean, excellent runner, nothing, and he's great at escaping the pocket. I just really, I've watched his games and I'll watch just him. The way that they scheme it up, he's not a great deep ball thrower. They really give him a lot of easy throws, right over the middle, seam routes. He's not throwing out routes on a very consistent basis. And so that's where he just needs to take a step. He's still young. He's got room to develop. And but that's kind of where I've seen him. I think those are kind of the top 4-ish guys. And then a guy that I'm really high on, and I know the next guy on this list is Josh Hoover. I like him, and I think he's in that tier. Very good passer.
I'd probably have him third, to be honest, on this list after Levitt and Robertson. Yeah. I like Hoover. Hoover had a heck of a season last year. His numbers were very impressive.
Great thrower of the ball. I think that scheme works well for him. He loses a ton of talent. He's going to lose Besh and Savion Williams. But after that, I really like Brendan Sorsby. I think Sorsby is a really, really good player. He's a guy that I'm way higher on than consensus. I think he's not thought of as highly because his team wasn't as good last year, but I think he does pretty much everything you need him to do. He's a good thrower. He can run the ball. He's big. He's durable. I think he's a really, really good quarterback for this conference. I think him and Barron and probably Jalen Daniels and Beck kind of form that next tier for me below guys like Sawyer and Avery.
Daniels just has to stay healthy. We haven't seen. Same with Connor Wigman was very good at A&M when he was healthy. Problem is he couldn't stay healthy.
Yeah, and then it's fascinating. Retzlaff was a guy that I was not high on at all. I actually think BYU is going to be better for him being gone. I just think his ceiling was incredibly low. And I know what is, the most popular guy on the team is the backup quarterback, as the old mantra goes. But I really just thought he left a lot on the table. I think he was nowhere near the top 8 in this conference. I just didn't think highly of him as a quarterback. And I think they've actually got more upside with him out of the picture now. You got guys like Baron Morton, who had a good season. I think the efficiency numbers are tough. The yards per attempt, yards per completion, the QBR. There was a lot of window dressing to his total stats that I think may give you pause, and I don't think you can really justify having him above guys like Robertson and Hoover and other pieces like that. But he's a good quarterback. He can win you some games. And then Jalen Daniels, like you said,
Yeah.
he's just got to stay healthy. And I think he's a better thrower of the ball than Johnson and Dampier for sure. If you're looking at some of these dual threat guys, I think he's actually a pretty good thrower of the football. He's just got to find a way to stay on the field and be healthy. That's really his biggest thing.
Dampier's an interesting one to me because you transfer from New Mexico. For those of you out there that didn't know, threw for 2,700 yards last year, 12 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. Very mediocre there. Ran for 1,400 yards and 19 touchdowns. So
insanely productive.
Yes, and anytime near the goal line, he was tucking it, and it worked out well for them. That was the best season that program's had in years. So much so that Mendenhall went home and took the job at Utah State. But teams in this conference will make Dampier beat him with his arm. Can he do that? I don't know the answer to that.
And I think, I don't want to get too much into the Utah preview. He does not have a good crop of wide receivers to throw to. No. It may be worse than the crop Utah had last year.
Oh,
his deep ball he'll float it up there and he'll give his guys a chance. I mean, it was like a 30% completion percentage on throws of 25 plus or more. Just not an elite accuracy quarterback. He is, though. I mean, the Big 12 has some elite dual threat athletes. When you look at Daniels and Johnson and Levitt and Dampier, I mean, those are going to be top 10 in the Power 4 as far as scrambling ability. Elite athletes, and he is
David Jackson's
very
a good scrambler too. Yeah,
absolutely. A guy that's maybe a little overlooked, but Dampier's electric in the run game. And if that's how they're going to use the quarterback, it's hard to factor that in all the way with his rushing statistics. I just don't think of him highly as a passer yet.
Yeah, like a little bit later, we'll get into some college fantasy stuff. Dampier's a fantastic fantasy player because you're getting 6 points of rushing touchdown. Yeah.
And he's going to run the ball a ton. He's just going to tuck it and run all the time.
One guy I want your take on from this, Caden Salter. He was great at Liberty. We knew he'd hit the portal and end up as a starter at a P4. I like Salter. I like Colorado. I hate the marriage of those two under the offense they ran last year. He is not a fit at all for the offense they ran last year. Presumably, they will change it to accommodate him. They have to, otherwise it's not going to work out.
Yeah, it's almost the Caden Salter question is really, what do you think of Pat Shurmur as an offensive coordinator, and how well do you think he can adapt to this grouping of skill position talent and quarterback? Caden does some things well, but you saw, when he had a coordinator change up at Liberty, it went very poorly for him last season. He was talked about as a high draft pick, and then coordinator change, and he did not do well with that. So I think he's very system dependent.
Agree. And like you said, what can Shurmur do for him? That we'll find out. And I was Fafita's an interesting one. 2 years ago, he was great with Jed Fish. Last year, he had one of the best receivers in the country. They weren't very good. Which Noah Fafita are we going to see this year? I like, Ismail Mahdi was a good addition as a running back for them, but their receiving core is not going to be as good last year just because you lose the one mega dude you had to throw to.
Yeah, and I think, if you look at wide receivers 2 through 4, I actually think Arizona might have upgraded, but you do not have anybody that's nearly as good as T-Mac last year. I think Fafita, I'm open to him being a lot better just because I think the offensive scheme was so bad last year. Like, I don't know which one of these quarterbacks would have been good in what they were trying to run last year. It was non-cohesive. It didn't work as a system. So I'm open to him being a lot better, and you've seen him be really good. And so I think that's a benefit, and that pushes him higher. Like for me, I have him higher than Weigman. I have him higher than Salter. I have him higher than Markial or Jackson or whoever Oklahoma State has.
I like Weigman, but I have him higher as well. And I will say for the Arizona, if in fact we have any Arizona Wildcat fans listening here, I'm not optimistic about that. Yeah. But last year, you talk about Daggy being Arizona's new O coordinator. When Marshall made a QB change last year and Braylon Braxton went in, if they run that offense, Fafita's a very good fit. So the offense Marshall ran when they were winning games and won the conference last year, Fafita's a good fit for that. That's
Yeah, and my questions around the Arizona offense revolve, more, the QB's a question, but the tackle position is a
yes.
huge question mark. What does the offensive line look like? What are they going to do at some of these defense? Those are the questions I have more about Arizona than a Fafita resurgence would not solve all of the problems that the Arizona roster currently has.
Certainly not. Oh, and they did go out in the portal and get some guys, but
Yeah.
and some guys from major schools. They didn't get a lot of guys that were starting and really successful at other big schools either, though.
Yeah.
So,
And it's
um,
just we'll see. We'll see
yeah,
what happens there. I'm open to them being better this year. I think they've got a higher ceiling than some of these teams down here at the bottom. And I know it's on a team preview, but yeah, we'll see. I think Daggy has to do a lot. He has to be excellent and in the 95th percentile of what you hope he would be in order for
yeah.
them to really have a good season.
One thing our viewers out here, will want to know with obviously Jake Retzlaff is on this list. He's gone from BYU now. What are your takes on who will that starter be now? We've seen Bourget, you transfer from Western Michigan, is there.
Yeah.
Bear Bachmeyer will be a freshman. What do you, have you done your BYU preview? Might be a good way to start that
And
question.
I had the number 2 pegged as McKay Hillstead
Okay,
before
yeah,
the Bachmeyer
yeah.
transfer. That's who it's just going to be so hard for Bachmeyer to come in and do you supplant those guys with, you didn't do spring ball. You're going to beat those guys out with a summer and a fall camp. That seems really hard for me to believe. I like the talent, but I mean, there's a reason Stanford didn't keep him. I like what Andrew Luck's doing over there. I think Hillstead's got the inside track, but I would say inside track at like a 40% favorite. I won't be,
Okay.
I think you would make the field a bigger favorite than him individually. That's at least how
Okay.
I see it. What do they got? They have Trayson, the kid named Trayson. His name
Bourget,
escapes me, but
yeah, he was the one who was
yes,
at Western
Bourget.
Michigan that I mentioned. Yeah.
Yep. So
He'd been at
we'll see.
WMU for 2 years, then was at Baylor last year, or at BYU last year, excuse me.
Yep.
Didn't play. In fact, and his brother, Trenton, was the former Arizona State player who is now, I believe, a grad assistant at Arizona State in coaching.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Nice reference. Yeah.
Yeah. But QB wise, yeah, we get a lot of different like SEC, ACC. A lot of the guys kind of fit a mold. That's not at all the case with this group. These guys are all in just the style they play, how they look. We have a lot going on with this list.
Yep. And, kind of the last 4 groups that they'll talk about, you got Connor Weigman at Houston. I think he's clearly above these bottom 3 guys. There's just not enough experience with Nico at West Virginia and Taven Jackson, my presumed starter at UCF. He just didn't play a ton last year at Indiana. And then I think it's actually going to be Zane Flores at Oklahoma State, but those guys have a combined 0 pass completions as a unit. It's just, how do you rank that group higher than 16th? I don't think they'll finish there. But
I was talking with a guy recently with Oklahoma State. Their QB should be Jake Retzlaff. That's where they should go. Like, that'd be a good spot for him to end up right now, really.
Yeah. I mean, it would just be so hard to integrate into a team that quickly.
It would be. But it's, it's one of the few P4 spots where he could go now and probably start day one. That's how poor they are at that position. There aren't many of those schools.
My thing on Oklahoma State is I'm 95% sure they will not finish at 16th. There's just no way to rank them anywhere other than 16th now with a group that has 0. Zane Flores and Heine, both highly thought of prospects. They beat out, Malachi Smith. They beat out Garrett Rangel. Those were pretty highly thought of guys. One of these guys is going to be okay and not the worst quarterback in the conference. It's just you can't rank them anywhere other than this right now.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, a fun conversation on the QBs, though, man. It'll be a lot of really dynamic guys. I think a lot of volatility. If you see some, passing regression with some of these guys, it's going to be tough for some of these dual threat quarterbacks. There's also the huge element. When I grade rooms, there's just a bigger emphasis than normal on the backups. Who do you have behind you? That's an important question if you're Kansas, if you're Texas Tech, if you're, maybe Kansas, guys that are just in the line of fire more. What does it look like if this guy goes down? Now, it's not everything. Ideally, your starter plays every single snap of every single game, but I do give some weight to that. And there's some rooms that have, for example, Colorado has Julian Lewis, 5-star freshman.
Yeah.
That's a better place to be in than, let's say, BYU. And so that you should get rewarded for that building depth there,
Yeah.
and especially in this day and age.
Kansas has Cole Ballard, not great. He at
But
least has some
better than some
experience.
situations. Better than some
He has some,
situations.
and I mentioned him because I have almost zero confidence that Jalen Daniels will play 12 games. We've not seen him do it. Yeah. He's just out there. He's carrying the ball too much.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, but good stuff.
Yeah, one of our, and this has kind of been our shortest segment of the episodes, but talking about college football fantasy. And we have, it's something I'm into a lot. And I always ask, our guests, about some sleepers, whether it be slightly under the radar, real deep sleepers. But who would be some slightly under the radar sleepers that you might say
it
out of
depends.
the Big 12?
Yeah, hard. It depends on how much you know about the Big 12. This one, I think one of the running backs that's not getting talked about enough in this upper echelon of the Big 12 running backs. You got guys like Bryson Washington and Abu Sama, Carson Hansen, Quentin Joyner, guys like that everybody's going to know if you play. Wayshawn Parker and Naquari Rogers, those are the two Utah running backs. If Devin Dampier isn't hemorrhaging and taking all of the touchdowns at the goal line, I think both those guys are really, really good players. That's somebody that I would at least look at as, if you have a strong take on which one of the guys you think is going to be the RB1. I hate this wide receiver room. I think they're going to have to rush the ball really, really well in order to be effective. And I think one of these guys is going to end up getting a ton of the workload here alongside Dampier. That'd be something that I'd be interested in, just because of how poorly I think this wide receiver room is.
Okay.
Another guy. Yeah, go ahead.
To say my running back who might be under the radar would be Tawee Walker at Cincinnati, transfer from Wisconsin. I think between him and Sorsby, they're going to run the ball quite a bit. Walker could be the guy that is a good fantasy option because of that.
That's exactly who I had. I had Miles Montgomery at UCF.
Yeah.
I think Jaden Nixon's going to compete for that RB1 role. I just don't like the lighter. He's got good speed. He doesn't have like Devin Neal speed, and he's not big enough to carry a workload. I think Miles Montgomery's good. He was just behind RJ Harvey last year.
He was.
I think he's a good back. He graded out well. I think UCF's going to be in another situation. Their wide receiver room might be worse than Utah's. They're going to need to run the ball a ton to be successful. And then Kedrick Riscano at Arizona, another guy that should get a ton of work. OL questions, general offensive ability linger here. I've got wide receivers and tight ends if you want to get into them. But
I do one more running back I was going to say for me who we haven't seen play much ball, but I think could end up being a decent fantasy. Rodney Fields at Oklahoma State, another team who, because of their breaking a new QB in, especially early in the year, they're probably going to be running the ball quite a bit. If Fields is that guy, and he looked very good in spring, we heard good things about him. Rodney Fields could be that guy. So, let's move on to receivers, please.
Yeah, I like to find guys that played well behind really good players that just didn't. They were just behind on the depth chart, but they didn't perform poorly. Amari Miller at Colorado's a guy. If we see anything like last year in Colorado's offense where they throw it as much as they did, he has a very clear path to be the wide receiver one for this offense. If Caden Salter can be okay, I think the offensive line should be better. He's got a really good chance. Chase Sowell at Iowa State, big opportunity for him to be the wide receiver one there. Becht will throw the deep ball. He will get it out there to those guys, and he will hyper target you if you are his favorite target. I think Chase has an opportunity to do that. He is by far from a sure thing, though. So if you're looking for a big hit, and then this is probably the highest risk, but a guy that I liked watching is Bryson Canty for Kansas. Lower ranked guy.
They got to replace all three receivers too.
Yeah. So. Quentin Skinner, Lawrence Arnold, all those guys are gone. He's somebody that I liked his film. I liked his tape. I think he's quick. I think he's elusive. And I think he's going to be a good receiver. He's got good camp reports from some of the inside stuff that I've read. Once again, that is a super deep cut. That's not somebody that I would take early on, but that's just a name I would keep in the back of your mind.
My receiver who the slight, not super deep sleeper, Coy Eakin with Texas Tech.
Yeah.
If he's getting the Josh Kelly, targets in that role, he could be a very good fantasy player.
Sure.
Good things about.
If you want another one from Tech, I know he had all sorts of drama last year, but Micah Hudson has had really good summer reports, has apparently been playing really, really well. The 5 stars back on the roster. This offense makes a ton of sense for him. Just go get open, run within this structure. I think he's got a really good chance. If you're wanting a high upside, extremely low floor, late round take, he'd be a guy that I'd look at.
One more I wanted to say is another team who's replacing a lot of their receivers at TCU. Jordan Dwyer transferred from FCS
Yeah.
Idaho. Had
hmm
12 touchdowns last year, almost 80 catches, over 1,000 yards. And with what they have, I mean, he's probably going to be a guy that's playing a lot, if not starting, just because you had brought it up before when we were talking about Hoover, all the talent they have to replace. So I think that Jordan Dwyer could be a guy, from TCU.
Yep, another good one. Finally, I'll clear with my tight ends. Tanner Koziol at Houston is a guy I'd be interested in.
Fantastic player.
Should absolutely dominate. You just may not have heard of him because he's at Houston. And then Oscar Hammond at Oklahoma State, another guy that I thought had a really good season last year. North Texas.
We talked about Koziol on the show a couple of weeks in our Big Ten one because he was at Wisconsin in the spring, and then so we actually brought him up as a guy who, in because we were pretty low on Wisconsin for this year. They lost a few guys after the spring, and Koziol was one of them. Started cutting. I think, who did you say after him though? Yeah,
Oscar Hammond out of North Texas, another guy I think that could be really good. So once again, those are deep cuts. Those aren't going to be. That's not your Terrence Carters, your Benjamin Bromers, your Garrett Oakleys. Guys that are going to be higher ranked early on. But if you're looking for a later guy, maybe take a look at those dudes.
That's a good one. Yeah, I think one. And this is my sleeper tight end. Is not the one guy said not necessarily a Big 12, not a Big 12 guy, but Brett Norfleet at Mizzou. They're replacing receivers and a new QB, so Norfleet from Mizzou could be a guy.
Yeah.
Now, our next segment will be the Big 12 on the whole. We'll talk about the conference itself and then our playoff predictions, but I'm going to put you on the spot now.
Yeah.
2 teams to make the Big 12 title. Who do you think they are?
And this is going to sound like a homer pick. I'm going to take Baylor. I think they've got the most efficiently constructed roster. They've got a ton of returning production. I think it's the year that Aranda can get the defense fixed. They've got the quarterback. They've got the defensive line pieces. I think they've got answers to every question that you'd ask about a roster. I'll put them in there. And then, it'll make me a homer, but I'm going to take the Red Raiders. I'm going to say that, Baylor and Tech find a way to play again for one of the longest running conference matchups in the history of the sport. They're going to find a way to play again, and it's going to be in Arlington. It'll be Tech's first time ever there. Once again, I put that at like 5% likelihood, but that'll be my pick is Baylor and Tech. And so much of that is also who do you avoid and who do you not have to play? And Tech gets a favorable draw not having to play TCU and Baylor in the regular season. So, but lots of really intriguing options who can actually make it there.
That scheduling is a good point. A good point. I'm glad you picked those two because last week when we had our Sun Belt guy on, I agreed with him on the same team from the East and West, and because Sun Belt's still the only conference that has 2 divisions. We're both JMU and Louisiana. I have 2 different ones than you. I am going with Arizona State to make it back to the conference title game, and Kansas State, I think, is the other one. So
I think very, very reasonable take.
I would love to see a Baylor and Tech conference. So that would be awesome to see those 2 teams make it.
It would be so, and if I play devil's advocate, because Kansas State is a team, Arizona State, just some notes on them as a team. People forget, everybody talks about Scadaboo and Levitt. Their defense was actually better than their offense in SP Plus last year. They really were led by their defense and the pass rush, and they return. I mean, they lose some guys on the defensive side of the ball, but they return all but I think it's 3 starters from last year, which in this day and age is
7 or 8
crazy.
they were brought back. Brian Ward's a very good D coordinator. He's a guy who potentially could be a head coach at the G5 level. I think maybe in a year or 2 he's done a good job there.
I mean, it's going to be pretty much the same team, absent Scadaboo and absent some kind of mid wide receivers. What you saw last year from Arizona State, which, to be fair, finished 4th in the Big 12 and SP Plus even after the Big 12 championship game. It'll be the same team.
Their O-line's going to be salty again too. That'll help whether it's Udo or I'm blanking on the other guy. Is it Brown?
Kyson Brown.
Yeah, I mean they're still going to run the ball pretty well. I think. Those 2 guys will split. I think neither of them will get the workload Scadaboo did, but yeah, I think all 4 of those. The other point you made a point. I didn't pick Baylor to get to the conference title game, but I am with you in that I think their defense does improve this year.
Yep.
From what I can.
And they're similar to Arizona State. I think they have more questions than Arizona State as far as the returners go. Ashton Hawkins isn't eligible right now. They lost their right tackle, their only good tackle, really. I don't really believe in Sidney Fugar. And I think Caden Siraki's a very mid replacement at best. So I think that room got worse. And then they lose. It'll be the interior defensive line for Baylor. Linus Noel, Trevin May, both gone. Garmin Randolph, gone. It's just going to be what does it look like? Dude, does Samu, I'm not even going to pronounce his name, the A&M transfer, does he work out? Does Adonis Freelou from Tulsa
or something like that? I think one interior guy to look for, Adonis Freelou from Tulane could be a good D tackle that plays for him. He's pretty solid.
And the Aranda defense, when it's good, they've got to have a good nose tackle. They just really do. Do you believe in Lance, Freelou, Samu, Tizino? Do you believe in any of those guys stepping up? I think it's a step down from last year, but you never know.
They are certainly very wide bodies that will take up blockers because they are both massive human beings.
Totally. So, other teams, if I had to, pick teams that I'm higher on than consensus, maybe slightly toward Iowa State, but that's a low floor team for me this year. I like a lot of what they brought back. They bring back Caleb Bacon from injury. They're all-world linebacker. He'll be, potentially an all Big 12 selection. Baylor, I already talked about them. Cincinnati, I'm actually kind of high on. I just really like Sorsby. I think their offensive line questions are mildly answered, even though they did lose. Luke Kandra was a big loss from last year. I think they got better on defense. I think they're going to be better on offense. SP Plus has it the exact opposite. And so that's where I'm kind of willing to take a stab on them being better. And then Colorado.
Go talk about Colorado. Then I'm going to talk about Houston.
Yeah. Colorado, once again, that offense was good, but it was really driven by their performance last year was driven by the massive improvement in defense. It was like 112th to 40th in SP Plus, and their defensive line's still going to be really good. They've got good safeties. They've got good cornerbacks. They've got questions at linebacker, but that should still be a very good unit. That wasn't just Shedeur and Travis Hunter on that team. They had a good defense. And I think they'll still be pretty salty this year, and I think a lot of people are overlooking them.
Great point. I like that. I was going to talk about Houston. We're seeing their win total anywhere between 4.5 to 6.5. And I definitely, if it's 4.5, I definitely think Houston gets the over there.
Sure.
6.5, I don't know that they get to 7 wins. That's asking a lot. But I think, and in year 2 of Willie Fritz, getting to a bowl game has to be the goal. That getting that 6th win, I think, is what you're driving for. In looking at they're going to win 2 of their non-con games for sure. At Oregon State's an interesting non-con game for Houston. I'm not on the road. I'm not prepared to say that's a win for sure.
Yeah.
They better get that win, though, if they want to go to a bowl game. But then, you go to Oklahoma State. They do have Arizona at home. Like, their schedule is it could be better. It could be worse in their state, I guess. But them getting to 6, I think that's the dream for them. Do you think they get to a bowl game?
I think it depends on how well do you replace Sheil Wood at defensive coordinator. He did wonders for them last year. That was a very competent defense in the Big 12 last year, to a lot of people's surprise. Brendan Mack's going to be a really good addition to have. They do lose Keith Cooper, but Carlos Allen, Brandon Mack, Khalil Afu, Eddie Walls, it's going to be a pretty good defensive line. That should be an upper, top 10 defensive line in the Big 12, maybe top 6. It's just really going to be, man, what do you do in the secondary? They lose so many guys out of there. It's just Jeremiah Wilson and AJ Halsey were huge spring portal losses. And those are tough guys to replace generally. Having a summer or a spring portal window to do it instead of the winter portal window, very, very tough. So very hard for me to see a step up defensively for them this year. I think the offense just has to be way, way, way better to offset what I anticipate being a pretty significant step back on the defensive side.
I think that's a good. They have in fact new coordinators on both sides. About Austin Armstrong is the new D coordinator, was at Florida, and then Slade Nagel had been an assistant at LSU and Tulane. I was actually grad assistant at Northwestern State when he was our offensive coordinator.
Very nice.
Ago. But so we got the new coordinators, but that the spring portal attrition hurt Houston really bad. Yeah.
More than any Big 12 team this
Yeah.
cycle. It was just a huge blow to that defense.
Yeah. But them at, that their win totals in there. Arizona's at 5.5. I don't know that they get. That's going to be a
Yeah, that's
tough number
very
for them
tough.
to get to. I
Yeah,
think.
I've got Arizona, on my number. If you'll give me a moment, I can get it. But
Go for it. Yeah.
that's just not. There's just so many questions, and they may answer some of them, but can you answer all of them? I just don't necessarily see that. I've got them as my 13th ranked team in the conference right now, which I guess is maybe an improvement from last year, but just still, probably not where you're going to want to be. It's going to come down to a lot of those 50-50 games. Do you win the one score games and kind of eke out a bowl? Maybe. I just don't see the super high end upside.
And what hurts Arizona too is think about going prior to the conference realignment a couple of years ago. One of Arizona's non-conference games is Kansas State this year in Week 3. That's a tough game. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's just really tough. And the schedule thing is really tricky. Who I think has a really good schedule is Cincinnati. They miss Kansas State, they miss Texas Tech, they miss Arizona State. They get Baylor, UCF, Iowa State, Arizona, and BYU all at home. They get 5 Big 12 home games this year. That helps a lot.
At Kansas, at Oklahoma State, at Utah, at TCU. That's about as good as it can get in a conference.
Yeah. Sure. I don't think that you're just thinking, there's absolutely no chance that we win any of those games. Can I find a way to win one of those 4 road games? And then I think at that point, they do have Nebraska in the non-con, which is going to hurt a little bit, but they've got a chance to beat Nebraska. That's not a foregone conclusion. They brought in some good pieces. They lost Micah Coleman last year to injury before the season started. He's back. Matthew McDoom's going to be a really big upgrade for them at quarterback. I just think they've got a chance. The problem is they have Scott Satterfield at the helm, and I think that hurts them more than anything. Can they win despite him is kind of how I'm viewing this season.
Fantastic point. Yeah. And I think we don't know the answer to that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's we'll see. Some other teams I'm lower on. BYU, I just think the losses on the defensive side of the ball are...
I'm low on them. Yeah.
And I was low on them before the Jake Retzloff news. I just wanted to be on record that I'm a BYU hater before the Retzloff news was announced. But, I mean, man, Chase Roberts was so good. Or Tyler Batty was so good. John Nelson was so good. Blake Mangelson was so good. Harrison Taggart, they lost him in the Porter. Marquis Collins is gone. Jacob Robinson is gone. Crew Walkley left. They bring back, per my numbers, 3 starters on the defensive side of the ball. And that defense was really good last year.
Yeah, that's
and they brought guys in. Keanu Tanuvasa from Utah, that's a big ad. Justin Kirkland from Oklahoma State, big ad. And they'll develop from within like they always do. They're the toughest roster to project because they'll have guys that come back from Mission and are studs because they're 20-year-olds and they're freshmen.
Yeah.
But that's just a roster I am not super high on right now.
I agree. I'm with you on that one. Yeah.
A couple others that I had, go ahead.
I was going to say, looking at, we're talking about the schedules. What's the one Big 12 non-conference game you're the most excited to look forward to this year? I'll start with mine. And I've talked about this on our Thursday night show a bit. I am fascinated to see Baylor host Auburn Week 1. We might learn a lot about
exactly
both those
who I
teams
was going to pick.
Okay.
Yeah. I think I'll if I can't take that one, I'll take TCU in North Carolina. I think that's just at least an interesting power on power game. I think TCU should be favored. They should win that game, but you just never know. And there's games that we won't think about. Let's say BYU at SMU last year. That game was played on a random September night. Nobody really thought about it, and it ended up being between 2 top 15 teams in the country by the end of the season. And so there will be a game like that this year. Maybe Cincinnati knocks off Nebraska and they end up being really good, or there's other games like that you could think of, but those are the 2 best.
I'll repeat the Baylor one. It doesn't get much easier. Baylor goes to SMU after that. Yeah.
Yep. Tough. They're going to start off hot. I mean, they're first, and then they host Arizona State, I think 2 weeks after that.
Okay.
So they're going to start extremely hot. We will know exactly who Baylor is by the end of September.
Yeah. And I say this because it was an interesting game in the past, but I don't expect Texas State to go to Arizona State and win. They gave them a game before, though. It's one of those I'm curious to see, just the styles make fights, so to speak, and it's one of them that could be an interesting game. Yeah,
Yeah, it's, but they don't have Mac Leftwich, who's going to be the best
yeah,
offensive coordinator in the country if you're a Tech fan. So
absolutely.
that's
Yeah,
that's just a
okay.
big knock.
Yeah,
But we'll
beat
see.
the drum on that
I feel
one.
like I feel like I haven't beaten the Tech drum much today. I think they do have I guess I talked about them in the contenders. They've got a semi-favorable schedule here, but the thing that I look at, man, you go to Arizona State, you go to Utah, and you go to Kansas State. Teams that are top 5 in odds to
Yeah,
win the conference. That's a tough road draw. You only get 4 Big 12 games at home. There's some stuff working against you here. You're going to have to be a good team on the road because you're also going to get West Virginia on
yeah,
the road. You're going to get Houston on the road. You can't drop either of those. The schedule's pretty tricky. And now with the Big 12, there's always going to be 2 teams, a la Oklahoma State last year and Arizona last year, who everybody thinks is going to be good that end up being terrible.
yeah.
And then teams that you don't think are going to be good, a la BYU, Arizona State, who end up being really good. So
Another G5 one I'll say about BYU, we're both lower on them. I expect East Carolina to be a lot better this year. BYU goes to North Carolina and plays them. That could be a hiccup game. We'll see about that one. If they don't get their QB stuff and, that defense figured out, could be an interesting one there. I'll ask a Big 12 playoff question. Last year, they only got 1 team in the playoffs. Obviously, ACC got 2. Do you think the Big 12 can get 2 teams in the playoff this year? And will they?
I think you're going to have to. They certainly
Yeah.
could. The pathway exists.
Yeah.
I think you're going to need some help outside the conference, or you're going to need 2 teams to go like 11-1 and meet in the title game.
You probably also need only Clemson to make it out of the ACC, and everybody else to lose a lot of games. Yeah,
because I don't think that you will have the strength of, and rightfully so. I'm not going to beat the drum and say that wins are the only thing that matters. Who you beat and who you played matters a lot too. But I think losing matters as well. You can't just go 8-4 and demand to be in the playoff.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I just think you'll need some. I don't think a 10-3 Big 12 team, I don't think is going to make the playoff.
Yeah.
I think they're going to have to hit that 11-win mark.
Yeah. And it would be like if Baylor beats Auburn and SMU, that looks better for them and stuff like that.
And it needs. You're exactly right. It needs to be, and that's something. If I'm going to talk about Tech again, they don't have the non-conference schedule that allows them an opportunity to showcase themselves. Unless Oregon State with Malik Murphy ends up being really good somehow. There's just nothing, like nobody's congratulating you on beating Pine Bluff and Kennesaw State. That's just not going to be anything that probably hurts you in the eyes of the committee.
And even if Oregon State is good, nobody's going to know. Washington State was good last year. Nobody cared until Wake Forest hired Jake Dickert away. Then they cared.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's where just even playing somebody that has some name associated, even if you went and beat Virginia, let's just say a team that's going to be pretty bad in the ACC this year. They're actually one of the teams I think is going to be the most improved because their schedule. Have you seen Virginia's schedule though? The schedule is nice. I just don't know if the roster is going to be capable.
I think Chandler Morris will be okay. And they got Harrison Whaley, who's a 2-time 1,000-yard rusher at Wyoming.
I know. I just it's hard for me to see the totality, and I haven't done our Virginia deep dive, but whatever. It's just not a team that I'm just super excited. But anyway, a team like that, that still gives you a little more cachet than beating a Pac-12 cast-off.
Yeah.
So that's something working.
Yeah. You avoid Clemson, you avoid Miami, and you avoid. They play Louisville.
And I think they avoid Louisville.
And you avoid SMU.
They avoid SMU.
Yep. You don't play SMU, Miami, or Clemson. That's pretty lucky for Virginia.
Yeah.
So
very fair.
Not that they're going to be great. I think they hit the over on their win total. Is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Definitely, it could be a thing.
Yeah.
It's and that's one of the great things about this conference. I think there's just a lot of teams that can go into the season with a lot of hope, and I think that's really fun. I think if you look at some of the other conferences, successful seasons might look like making a bowl, and I think there's teams in this conference where that would be a successful season. But I know there's contingents
of probably the only 2.
Yeah, but there's contingents of fans even at Arizona that are thinking, Arizona State did it last year. Why can't we? And I don't think Mississippi State has those aspirations. I don't think that, Vanderbilt has those aspirations. It's just, it's not realistic. It is plausible for Arizona to just somehow become really good in this conference because
Vandy got 7 last year. One of our group questions last Thursday night was, can Vandy win 8 games? I'm a resounding no. I don't think so. Yeah.
Their win total sits at 4.5 right now, and it's just
Yeah.
and that speaks to the top end talent of the SEC, but even some of the
Yeah.
middle class there. And I'm not going to make this an SEC pod. It's just how
Yeah.
many teams can realistically win the SEC this year? 5. And that's not.
Yeah.
And there may be some teams that emerge, but the Big 12 has probably 10, and I think
Agreed.
there's
Yeah.
only. I think it's probably impossible for Oklahoma State. It just feels like it's impossible this year. Which sounds so odd given that they won it 3 years ago. But
I'm pulling up the coaching graphic just to see the team list again so we can
yeah,
Oklahoma State, Arizona. I don't think they can win it. I don't think Cincinnati can win it, even though they could be better.
I think Cincinnati can win it. I really do. It's just like
I don't think UCF can win it.
yeah. I mean, if that defensive line is going to be really good, but they were also really good last year, and it didn't matter.
Yeah. They might
It's
be the
just
only
that
ones. Yeah.
you
That
don't
might be
have
it.
to get that fortunate in this conference to win a lot of games. You just need to be semi better than expected for some of these teams, and you're all of a sudden in the top 4. If Houston is 6 points better than expected in SP plus, they're now all of a sudden right there in that middle to upper tier. And it's like
Good point.
that's a couple big transfer portal hits. And if some of these teams take a step back, you're right there. And that's a drawback of the Big 12 is that they don't have teams that are accumulating talent at an elite level. But it also gives a lot of fans hope. And so that's one of the things that I really like about this conference. So I'll
I
probably be
love
able to.
how close the betting odds are for everybody this year in the
Yeah.
Big 12. It's great to look at.
Yep. So
our last segment we always do is, I call it a hot take, but some people don't like that term, but a bold, under the radar, whatever you want to call it. What's a thought or take you have going into this season that a lot of people might not expect or that they might not think about?
if I want something extremely hot, like let's say less than 10% likelihood, I'll say that the Big 12 has 3 quarterbacks drafted in the first round. I think Levitt can get there. I think Johnson can get there. I think Hoover can get there. I think Robertson can get there. I don't think that's likely. I think Levitt is the most likely of the 3. That would be my flaming hot, very unlikely to ever hit take. If I had to pick, another one, it would be that no coaches get fired. I think there's a realistic world where Cincinnati and Arizona and Oklahoma State all overachieve slightly, and you can see the improvement. And nobody gets fired. That would be my other
we had no SEC coaches get fired last year, and one in the Big Ten. We might be seeing teams give longer leashes now. I think you brought a great point there. Yeah.
And, to be fair, I think the SEC is probably going to be carnage this year as far as the coaching carousel is going. So I'm not going to say no departures, I think. But like we talked about,
I'm just saying there were none last year. I think that changes this year. Yeah.
Yeah. And revenue sharing, I think, spooked a lot of people. But that would be my other mildly warm take, is that no coaches get fired this year.
I like it. Both great ones.
Yep.
Yeah. But want to thank you for being here again, everybody. Zyler Buchanan from the Broadway Shuffle podcast, focusing on Big 12 Texas Tech. Very glad to have you. Again, I will, for our users out there, they hopefully can, they'll see your contacts. I'll tag you in, on Twitter, YouTube, etc. But again, appreciate you being here, and everybody out there, have a great night. Thank you.
Mike, thank you, man. I appreciate it.